session about the history of entrepreneurship, giving some local business examples in Grant County. So without further ado, full attention to Caleb Crandall.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Can everybody hear me? Okay. So, this is my 4th year giving this, and I think, or maybe 5th, but I think every year it's different, and it's really great to see all you young people taking time out of your day to try to learn and better yourself. So, I want to encourage you in doing that learning in life is not just inside the classroom. It'll happen your entire life, and so if you continue to try to learn, whether that's in a job, whether that's starting a business, whether that's in your marriages or whatever, it's just a really great thing to see so many young people really taking steps out there to get smarter and to learn new things. So thank you very much for that. So you have to bear with me. So what's an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur is an individual who organizes and manages any enterprise, especially a business, usually with considerable initiative and risk. It's someone who starts a business and they envision, plan, organize, and grow. So as we had with our little exercise, there were several businesses locally that the 4 people represented. Payne's, who my firm actually got to help design Payne's years ago. Juju Berry, the Cupcakery, Tree of Life, which we also did that project. But in all of those instances, there was a local entrepreneur that saw the need in Grant County for whether it was cupcakes or bookstore or food in Gas City, and they really wanted to take that risk, and that's what they did, and they started their business. And I think all of those businesses have been open multiple years, which is quite an accomplishment. So, how do I do that? The arrow? So do I hit the down arrow? Is that how it works, down arrow? Okay. I apologize for that, guys. So, types of startups. Now, when I did this spreadsheet, or I guess PowerPoint several years ago. We had 4 different types of businesses, and even that's kind of evolving somewhat. But when I did it, social media was kind of new. I've only been out of college 10 years, and the university I went to was one of the first colleges, I think maybe the 8th college that Facebook was allowed to be a part of. And initially, in 2004, when Facebook launched, people that weren't in one of those universities could not be a member of Facebook. So think about all the different things that have happened just in less than a decade. I mean, the speed of kinds of business. So I did this about 4 years ago, and Twitter might have even not been around, or if it was brand new. I mean, it's the speed of business. So there's types of businesses you can start up. You got a small business. Can everyone see that, or do they have a flyer that they can read those if they can't see it? Small business is by far the riskiest to start. The Juju Berries, the Cupcakeries, they're really high risk, and they're a wonderful, rewarding thing, but they're high risk because individuals like us, people in the community, take it upon themselves and they go all in with their family generally, or they borrow some money from the local banker and they start up. So that risk is usually high, and their goal is to feed the family or make their community better. Then you get a scalable startup, which is a little bit bigger than your typical small business, and your risk is still high, but you have more of a broader vision. So Tree of Life would be a scalable startup. Tree of Life, what they do is they do Amazon fulfillment. So the front half of that is just a strip mall. But when we started on that project for Darren and for their family, the Tree of Life family, they were doing, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of book shipments for Amazon annually, but that's what they are. So the back end of that is just a distribution center. So I guess their business would be classified as a scalable startup or a medium-sized business. They're no longer a startup. But because they actually serve a greater area than just Grant County, they can actually grow into that size of business where they fill a 100,000 square foot building on the bypass. So, and then, if they continue to grow, they could go into this next category, which would be a large company. And the risk is lower for the larger companies, mainly because of access to capital. When you pool together large amounts of money, and lots of times you'll see people like Donald Trump do a new tower, like he just completed one in Chicago. Well, he didn't use his money. He had lots of people, because he was Donald Trump, want to do a 50-story building just off Michigan Avenue. And so the risk for that is lower because they spread it across lots of other people. So there's not too many large companies in Grant County, but I'll give you one example. General Motors, I think it was about 8 years ago, I was on the Growth Council, or 6 years ago. But General Motors was having some trouble nationally, but Grant County and Marion decided that they would approach General Motors and help them figure out a way to finance some new equipment through maybe some tax increment financing or some bonds or some creative ways to help GM's Marion facility stay viable and stay profitable for General Motors. Well, then the economy took a little bit of a downturn, and the large company like General Motors sees the Marion plant as a lower risk plant because they've got, I think, 1 million square feet. So with the larger company, the lower the risk. And GM really had trouble. I think they even filed bankruptcy, but they still didn't close. So these super large companies like that, once you've kind of reached that status, I think Sears has filed bankruptcy probably Sears/Kmart/Montgomery Ward probably 4 times in the last 20 years. But they're large companies with large amounts of assets. So if you get to the point where a company has started and reaches that level, the risk of them closing is much, much smaller. Lots of times you'll hear a phrase called too big to fail. Has anybody ever heard that? When they say something's too big to fail, if you haven't. But anyway, if they say something's too big to fail, that means it's a very large company. And even if some guy or gal does a horrible job running it for a year or two and they run it right into the ground, it's still a big enough company that competent people can pick it up and redirect it and keep the company moving forward. So that's just kind of the kinds of businesses. We touched on social. Sometimes, I guess you could look at social as 2 ways. Sometimes you have small not-for-profit businesses like incubators. That could be a social business. Sometimes I've had a friend that went to Indiana Wesleyan that went to South America, and they did some incubator work, but it was more missions work, but it was so that people that in South America that didn't have any money could get out of the trafficking and some of the other things that were happening, the human trafficking, through actually having means and having skill sets and having jobs. So that could be kind of a social thing. A lot of times that's faith-based and goes through ministry, but that's kind of that area. And then you have the social media stuff too. So, American entrepreneurs. So, just for a few minutes, and forgive me if you guys have already touched on who's entrepreneurs and who's not. Does anybody want to raise their hand and kind of just throw out some names of entrepreneurs? I mean,
Mark Zuckerberg, creator of Facebook.
Yep, he's one. Just throw a name out. Steve Jobs. Bill Gates. We'll just go around the room. Everybody just name one off the top of your head. It doesn't have to be big time. I mean, just... That's okay. I don't want to put you on the spot, but that's fine. Anybody else?
The 2 guys who made Ernst & Young.
Huh?
The 2 guys who made Ernst & Young.
Yeah. They would be. Anyone else? Calvin Klein. Henry Ford. Okay, those are all good ones. I mean, and the more you think about it, entrepreneurs are really everywhere. So the exercise early showed how many small and medium-sized businesses came out of Grant County in the last decade. And that was just a few of them. But then the ones you named just across the span across time, there's just entrepreneurs do a really good job of creating jobs, and then that helps foster community because if people have a job and they have something to be active and engaged in, then the communities thrive, and it's really a good thing to have an entrepreneur in your community. That's why our community is so invested in you young people, trying to teach you about entrepreneurship, because if one of you is an entrepreneur in Grant County in the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years, then this program is a success. So, okay. So the founding fathers were entrepreneurs. So they were farmers. You don't really think of a farmer as an entrepreneur, but they employ people. They buy machinery and equipment. The combines and those kinds of things are $1 million pieces of equipment. Well, there's somebody manufacturing those. Sometimes in Indiana, maybe it's Ohio, maybe it's Michigan, but someone is manufacturing that equipment. You got Ben Franklin. He invented electricity. He was a writer. He published the Farmer's Almanac, which is still around, like 350 years later, the Farmer's Almanac is still being published. So somebody still has a job because Ben Franklin founded the Farmer's Almanac. Abraham Lincoln, Paul Revere, Alexander Hamilton. So I say these people because it's relevant to your senior history classes and some of the other classes you have to take while you're in school. They teach about these people and what they did that was a part of history, but a lot of times they happen to also be entrepreneurs, and that was an impact that they had on their community. So Vanderbilt, people have heard about Vanderbilt University. Well, he was one of the wealthiest Americans in U.S. history, and he had so much money he founded a university in Nashville. So Carnegie, Gas City, there's a library on Main Street. That's a Carnegie Library. And there's thousands of them across the U.S. And they have that white limestone look. Literally, and you can drive through small towns all across the U.S. and you'll see a Carnegie Library. So he sold out to J.P. Morgan, who happens to, I don't think I mentioned Morgan in this, but people have heard about Morgan, J.P. Morgan. I mean, that's like you're watching a football game or you're watching TV, they've got J.P. Morgan commercials, invest with us. That's who bought Carnegie Steel, which is U.S. Steel, which, has anybody ever driven to Chicago? So you've driven down the I-90-94 way, where to your right you can kind of see Lake Michigan when you're getting in there. Before you get to that, there's miles and miles of steel yards. That's Carnegie Steel. It's now called U.S. Steel, but the Morgan family bought them out. So 100, 150 years later, that business is still thriving, and when steel goes down, Gary and that whole area suffers, and then when steel's riding high, then the greater Chicago metropolitan area thrives. So Rockefeller, so obviously, I mean, Rockefeller, just the name Rockefeller, you think of entrepreneurship. His net worth in today's value would be $663 billion. That's crazy. So, and he, quite a businessman. Thomas Edison. So, does anybody know what Thomas Edison was? Anybody? Somebody yell it out.
Inventor of the light bulb.
Inventor of the light bulb. He famously invented the light bulb. He famously, I think, didn't invent, 10,000 things or 14,000 things. But he didn't see those as failures. He just saw those as times that he tried to do something and it didn't work, and so he kept retrying and working to invent things. So he established General Electric. So looks at it, he had over 1,300 patents. That is crazy. But has anybody heard of General Electric? Maybe you have a GE microwave. I know you've got GE light bulbs. GE Capital is one of the largest banks in the world. GE is the largest corporation in the world, if you take out the banking institutions. And so this famous inventor, literally, GE has thousands and thousands and thousands of employees throughout the U.S. I was driving back from the East Coast where I had a job a week ago, and I passed all these, they were coal refineries, and they were literally power stations that were feeding and generating power that was delivering electricity to the entire East Coast. And that was mainly because of Thomas Edison, and they are all subsidiaries of GE. So you think about these guys that are figures in American history, and they're just somebody in your history book, but their impact is still felt today because people have jobs. So Christopher Columbus, like him or not, you know, he technically discovered America. He didn't, but anyway, that's what we're taught. Christopher Columbus, he was looking for a trade route. That's what he was doing. So he wanted to find a different way to get spice from China to Europe, and instead of having to go around. And so he, quote unquote, found America. But that's what he did. And what he did is he asked the all around Europe, and he got the Queen of Spain to give him seed money that he used to have 3 ships and equip that with the food and the staff to be able to come to America. So, you know, we're kind of taught that he's an explorer, but he actually was an entrepreneur trying to find a different trade route. So he was trying to solve a problem. Henry Ford, we already mentioned Henry Ford. The Ford family owns the Detroit Lions, among other businesses. But when Detroit had its downturn, if the Ford family wouldn't have been the owners, that football team may have left and went somewhere else, which wouldn't really affect us unless you're a Lions fan. But think of, you know, as people make it in business, how many people are dependent on those jobs. And so the Ford family, that was over 100 years ago, and the impact not only is felt in Detroit because they've kept Ford Motors there, but they've been able to bring and attract NFL team there. So Zuckerberg, so net worth is a lot higher than 13.5 now. I don't know what it is, but when they had their IPO, which is initial public offering last year, I don't know, do you guys remember when Facebook stock went on sale? It was probably about a year or two ago, and everybody went crazy, and so his net worth is much, much more than that now. And then it went up triple of that, and then it went back down after the dust settled. But somebody mentioned him. He's an entrepreneur. Dennis Crowley, this was a social media thing, and he set up, what's the social media thing where you're going to be the mayor of this bar? Foursquare? Is that what it's called? Yeah, sorry. So I did that a few years ago. I probably should take that out. That shows you sometimes how entrepreneurship can't be just a great success. That Foursquare was huge, and as quickly as it became huge, it fell apart. There used to be a thing that tried to mimic Facebook that came out. It was called MySpace, and it was basically, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. It was a failure, but someone paid $1 billion for it only to shut it down. So that's an interesting story. So why did they do it? Lots of times people do it because they think they can do it better. They want to fulfill a dream. They want to help others. They want to be your own boss. They want to create opportunity. They want to build equity. Sometimes they want the financial reward, and sometimes they just want prestige of being their own business owner. They want to be known for being the restaurant owner. If anybody remembers the Ice House before it closed a couple years ago, for 30 years, the Ice House was the place to go in Marion, and it was because of Steve Roseley, who was working at Dana at the time, wanted to have a place where everybody could go and gather and have a nice meal, and Steve enjoyed the prestige of being the owner of the Ice House. There wasn't a person that went through the door that he didn't go shake their hand and pat them on the back. And so sometimes it's not even financial, because I don't think Steve made a whole bunch of money with it, but he just loved the prestige and the idea of being his own boss, that he actually left a great job with Dana or retired early, however that worked, and went and did that. So there's lots of different motivation. And what's not on the slide, I'll touch on for a minute. What you won't see, what I would want to say that you don't want to do when you start a business, your motivation shouldn't be to get rich. Your motivation should be to solve a problem, or to make your community better, to make the lives of your family, your friends, and people in your life better. I'm a firm believer that if you're actually solving a problem, or you're trying to make the world better, that the success will come. If you're sole purpose in business is to get rich at the expense of others, you won't be in business very long. And I can also tell you that that your name will be tarnished, and that you won't find the success you're looking for. Business in being an entrepreneur takes a certain kind of will, and takes a lot of good attributes. If you're in business to rob and cheat other people, you won't be in business long. And not that you guys are doing it, but I just wanted to give you a quick lesson, because there's so many businesses that start up and fail, and a lot of times they fail just because the people that were in it for the wrong reasons. And so if you're in it to solve a problem and you're in it to make your community better, then the people around you in your community will support the business. They'll come alongside you because they'll want to see you succeed. They'll see you as a great guy, see you as a great lady, and they'll see that you're genuinely trying to solve a problem, and they'll give you a chance, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's as a manufacturer, or you start an insurance business, or you start any kind of thing that you're going to do, a little clothing business. If you're in it to try to make the community, make your world a better place, people will come along and they'll want to give you their money. They'll want to do business with you because you'll actually be providing something the community needs. So, I don't know. I think that, not that you guys are that way, but it's something that you need to be told, because I've seen a lot of businesses come and go. I've only been in business 9 years, and we've seen a lot of people come and go, and a lot of times it's related to trying to basically get, like, I'm going to get mine kind of attitude. And if you have that, then that's no way that long term, that's not a good way, good formula. So how do they do it? So a lot of times they take action steps. And these are things that you guys have already probably gone over a little bit, but you do a business plan, you do the success, you fail, and if you do fail, you go back to the drawing board, and you don't call it a failure, because anytime, a failure would be classified more as quitting. That's really the only failure. You guys are young, you got a whole life ahead of you, Lord willing, like that you'll just, 50, 60, 70 years left on this earth. So failures would be times that you just give up rather than learn something. That doesn't mean stopping. If you've got a business that's losing money and you're going to lose your house, well, maybe it's a good idea to stop. But if you don't learn something from failing a class in college, I failed, I don't know how many classes in college, 3 or 4. I got a degree. I've got, several businesses that we own, but I learned something from all of those. I may not learn it immediately, but failure is going to be a part of whatever you do, and you have those forks in the road where you actually learn something from it, and then it's not a failure, it just causes the next action step. So, did you have a question?
I was going to say, kind of like, it's best said by Edison, I didn't find 1,000 ways, like I didn't fail 1,000 times, I found 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's perfect. So, one thing, past the failure thing, a lot of times you pitch plans to investors. Anybody ever watch Shark Tank? Does anybody ever watch that show? Yeah, I TiVo it. That show's awesome. So, a lot of times that show, and we even talked a few years ago about doing like a Grant County Shark Tank, but it's kind of, just a lot of moving parts there. But yeah,
October 30th.
Yeah, so they're finally doing one. So that's great. A lot of what you don't see in the Shark Tank is you don't see the 10,000 people that have submitted their businesses to get in. But what you do see in Shark Tank is you see that you pitch plans to investors, but not every investor is going to see your idea the same way you do. And a lot of times you'll hear if the people don't get their idea bought, the guy goes backstage or the lady will go backstage and they'll say, well, I'll show them, I'm going to make it a success. And that's a good attitude sometimes, that they're saying, no, I'm going to continue to persevere. So, and then some of them learn from that experience. And a lot of times you'll see the best ideas and the best entrepreneurs on Shark Tank, they go in there with the attitude and they will literally tell the sharks, Well, it's not so much your money. I want to come alongside. I want your expertise so that we can really make this idea that I love and this business I love go to the next level. And they recognize that they're not just looking for cash investment. They're looking for the mentorship. They're looking for someone who's been there before to help them. And so when you're looking to do your business, whether it's investment or whether it's a mentor, it's just an invaluable tool for you to have someone who's been there before, and you need to seek that person out. You need to read books of people that have done it before, but also try to find somebody locally, wherever you're living, whether it's Grant County or anywhere else, that has done what you're doing before, because their experience, you'll be able to learn from their failures without having to make their same mistakes. So it's really invaluable to do that. So collaborate. So that goes along, this slide just try again. So with Marion, you see that Marion in Gas City was all the gas boom. So we had all the glass factories. We have lots of things that are still here, like the General Motors plant, the VA, the paper industry is still here. We still have lots of manufacturers and farmers still here. And the current stuff in the area. So I think that's the end of it. So in closing, I just want to encourage you young people to really continue to learn like what you're doing right now, and not be afraid to fail. I've had a failed mortgage company, a failed t-shirt company. I failed out of college. I've graduated college, but I failed out of a part of a college and had to go on academic probation and get my act together. And lots of those doings were my own mistakes, but there are also just times where you fail. And so I think all too often you think, well, it's all going to be perfect. And it's really not. I mean, you're going to have those bumps in the road. And the success is, like I said before, is going to be measured on how you learn from that, because our life on this earth, Lord willing, is going to be 80, 90 years. And so every day or one mistake in a day should not define it, so long as we're able to learn from that. And so businesses like, I own the Jimmy John's. I don't know if you guys, she didn't say that, but I'm a franchisee for that. I know the franchisee for Moe's. I know the franchisee for Culver's. I know of the franchisees for McDonald's. I know the franchisee for Arby's. The people that founded Handy Andy were local. So all of those people live in Grant County, and in one way or the other have had failed ventures. And some of them had good ones, and they're just great successes, and some of them had failures. But if we were all to stand before you, we would all give you that message that, as much as I've learned as much from the failures or more as we have from the successes. And the mark on their character is that they've continued to persevere and to continue to learn and continue to try to get better each day, both in the classroom and out of the classroom. So I think that's about it for me, unless I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. I really, I don't know what you guys want to learn from me, but I've started lots of businesses in Grant County. Most of them are still open, but I don't know if you guys have any questions or not. So.
Does anyone have a question maybe regarding what their current business idea is, and you've heard some of the businesses he's been involved with, maybe bounce some ideas off of them?
Do your ideas, do they just come to you, or do you sit down and say, I want to open up something, and then you research the market to see what that market needs?
It's kind of a blend of that. So when you're starting a business, you're trying to solve a problem, whether it's a social problem, like there's dirty water in Africa, so there's seed money here that people are trying to plant there to be able to help people that don't have water, or whether it's in Grant County, there's no place to eat, so I'm going to start a place that I want to eat. Or Tree of Life saw that there was no textbook rental and these other things. So it's kind of a hybrid. Like, you do your research, but it's see a need, fill a need. And so I'm sure there's times that all of you guys are driving down the bypass, you're driving out in Gas City or wherever you're driving, and you say, boy, I wish we had one of those. Or you're in Indianapolis, say, boy, I wish we had one. Or I wish this product could be made better when you're in Walmart or Meijer and mad that something's not working. So lots of times it's kind of both of those. Like, you do your marketing and your research, but you also realize this stinks. I can do that better. So, or this isn't there and I can do it better by adding it. So that's probably not a good way to answer that, but it's kind of, I mean, it's either way really. Sometimes you research it first and then come up with an idea, but most of the time it's you see that something needs to happen or something needs to change and you want to be the agent of that change.
No more questions? Thank you so much, Caleb.
Yeah.
And does anyone have any questions about makeup sheets or attendance or anything like that? Also, tell your team members who weren't there that I believe all the makeup sheets from these sessions are due by next week. So from all the sessions from the first one up till now will be due next week. Everyone good? Okay. Awesome. See you guys next week.